Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're here to share some key highlights from our updated Alberta Energy Industry Water Use Report, which now shows company-specific data for Alberta's mineable and in-situ oil sands. To my left, we have Tristan Goodman, 8-year Senior Vice President of Industry Operations. Tristan will share details on our industry performance program and discuss what our next steps are to improve water use performance among energy companies in the province. We also have Kaylee Ellis, our Director of In-Situ Operations, and Aruna Biswanath, our Manager of Industry Performance Mining. Kaylee and Aruna will cover specific highlights from the updated report with a focus on water use and recycling by company within Alberta's mineable and in-situ oil sands. They'll also show you how to use the report tools. We'll have a question period at the end of the presentation, so I'd like to ask you to hold any questions you have until then. Before we begin, if there's an emergency during the event, go through the main doors of the room and turn left through the emergency exit doors. We also have AER staff here who will lead you to an exit, most of which are wearing name tags so you can identify them. So I'm going to introduce Tristan now to tell you more about our industry performance program.
Thanks very much, Bob. Appreciate the opportunity today, and good morning. As a single regulator for oil and gas activity in Alberta, it's our job to ensure that operators are developing resources in a safe and responsible manner. We know that to be effective, we need to make sure our actions drive industry behavior and the outcomes that Albertans expect are being met: public safety, environmental protection, resource conservation, and economic benefit. That means making sure our requirements are clear so that operators understand what they are accountable for. It means evaluating and reporting on AER operator performance. It also means understanding the latest technological changes and improving the regulatory system to ensure that energy development is safe and the environment is protected. To help us deliver these responsibilities, in 2016, we launched the Industry Performance Program. This measures, evaluates, and reports on energy development activities that we regulate. The program focuses on improving operator performance and sharing information on how we're doing with Albertans through performance reports. Since the program's launch, we've released 2 performance reports, one focusing on pipeline incidents and the other focusing on water use. Last May, we released the Water Use Performance Report, which showed how water is allocated and used by the 4 technologies that are applied to produce oil and gas in Alberta: oil sands mining, in situ, enhanced recovery of oil, and hydraulic fracturing. The water use data was reported on a provincial level. Today, we're taking the water use report a step further by releasing company-specific data for oil sands mining and in situ, which Kaylee and Aruna will walk you through shortly. Our provincial water use report shows that companies are using less water and improving recycling to develop Alberta's oil and gas resources. Energy development accounts for about 10% of all water allocated in the province. In 2016, out of that 10%, 22% of that was actually utilized by the oil and gas business. Our data also shows that companies have made considerable efforts to recycle water and limit their impact on the environment. For example, roughly 90% of all water used by technologies such as enhanced oil recovery and in situ was recycled in 2016 by separating and treating water from producing wells. Albertans depend on us to make sure that energy companies are using water responsibly. We take this job seriously and do this by conducting regular inspections on energy operations across the province to make sure that companies are following the conditions of their license and not using water that they're not allowed to use. If they are, we take action through a number of enforcement tools ranging from warning letters and fines to orders and prosecutions. But what does strong water use performance look like? Are energy companies in Alberta using water responsibly? The simple answer is yes. Across the entire energy industry, companies are using technologies and innovations to withdraw less water and recycle more of it in their operations to limit their impact to the natural environment. But it's important to note that measuring water use performance is about more than looking at who uses the least or who recycles the most. It's also about looking at each company, the technology they use, the size, the geology they're in, and where they're located. Each of these factors affect the company's water use. While we're encouraged by industry's efforts to use less and recycle more, we know that more can be done to improve this, and this will be an ongoing endeavor. And one of the ways that we drive industry performance is to hold industry accountable to public reports, and this is thus the water use today that we're releasing. As a regulator, we believe that publicly reporting on water use will encourage companies to compare themselves against their peers and motivate them to use less water and to use it more efficiently. Going forward, we will continue to report on the industry's water use annually to track their performance and compare how companies are improving their water use over time. We will also be following up with companies that are not performing as well to develop action plans and improve their water use over the coming months and years and limit their impact on the environment. As Albertans, water is key to our livelihood, and we're committed to protecting it. And now I'd like to turn it over to Kaylee Ellis, who is again the Director of In Situ within Industry Operations at the Alberta Energy Regulator, and she's going to go through some of the detail in the In Situ report. Thanks very much. Kaylee.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Tristan. Before I go into the data specifically, I'd like to provide some context about how water is used in situ operations. To produce oil using in situ technology, heat is used to decrease the viscosity of bitumen while it is in the reservoir. The most common source of heat comes from steam, and the majority of water used in situ operations is for steam production. Once the reservoir is sufficiently heated, bitumen is pumped back to the surface along with the injected water. The water is typically recycled back into the process. However, additional water, known as makeup water, needs to be added back into the process to account for the amount of water that has been lost to the reservoir. In situ projects require more water during the first few years of operations to heat up the reservoir where the bitumen itself is located. During the heating process, water typically stays in the reservoir for many years before it returns to surface with the bitumen. As in situ projects age, they require less makeup water over time because the water that was injected as steam returns to the surface and can be reused for their operations. Makeup water for in situ operations can be either non-saline or saline water. The in situ data in this industry performance report that's being released today focuses on the use of non-saline water. When we refer to non-saline water, we mean water that comes from lakes, rivers, surface runoff, or groundwater sources. Non-saline water can also include process-affected water from another project or operation nearby. Over the years, companies have made considerable efforts to use their water more efficiently and reduce their impact on the environment. As a result, companies are decreasing the amount of non-saline water they're using and instead using more recycled water by separating and treating the water that's coming back from producing wells, or by using alternative sources of makeup water, like saline groundwater. In 2016, companies recycled 86% of water used in their in situ projects. This represents a 7% increase from 2012, which means that companies need less non-saline makeup water for their operations. In terms of measuring how efficient companies are in using water, one thing we look at is non-saline water use intensity. This is the amount of non-saline water used to produce 1 barrel of oil. In 2016, in situ oil sands projects use an average of 0.21 barrels of non-saline water to produce 1 barrel of oil. This represents a 37% reduction in non-saline water use intensity since 2012. However, non-saline water use intensity is not the only factor that we look at when we talk about efficiency in situ operations. Every in situ project is different, and there are many different factors affecting a project's water use, such as the reservoir quality in which they're operating, a company's access to saline groundwater sources, and the operational phase of a project. As Tristan mentioned, we've updated the water use report to include company-specific information. Specifically for in situ, we've reported this information by project since there's a number of companies with multiple projects. So now I'm going to run through a quick demo of the Tableau report that is coming out today. So the first visual is water use by project in 2016. This figure is intended to show the whole picture of water use within the in situ sector. The bubbles are sized relative to the volume of water. Hovering over one of the bubbles will give you the exact volume of water that was used in 2016. The green bubbles are reflective of recycled water, blue accounts the non-saline makeup water, and gray is alternative makeup water, which, as I mentioned previously, would be saline groundwater. The second visual is water use performance by project for covering the years from 2003 to 2016. This shows each project's non-saline makeup volume in cubic meters, hydrocarbon production in barrels of oil equivalent, and their resulting non-saline water use intensity, which represents how much non-saline water they use to produce 1 barrel of oil equivalent. The industry average is shown on each metric as a dashed line to provide additional context. The filters are available for this data, which include the year 2003 to 2016, the scheme subtype, either commercial CSS, which is cyclical steam simulation, or commercial SAGD, steam-assisted gravity drainage. You can search by company, project name, or filter by hydrocarbon production volume. The use of hydrocarbon production volume allows you to compare companies of similar size project with one another. You can see that almost all in situ operators use some amount of non-saline makeup water in their daily operations. However, the majority of projects are below the industry average of 0.21 barrels of makeup water to barrel of oil equivalent. The third visual is a breakdown of water use by project from 2003 to 2016. This is intended to specifically show the amount of recycled water, alternative makeup water, oil sands process-affected water, and non-saline makeup water each project has used, shown in cubic meters on the left and the corresponding percentage on the right. This can be sorted by highest to lowest and vice versa by alphabetical order. The same filters and functionality are available for this graph as were previously shown. This graph makes it easy to see that the majority of water used at in situ facilities is recycled water, and in 2016, the average amount of recycled water at an in situ project is 86%. This graph also allows you to take a deeper dive into any one of these specific projects. Selecting one or more project highlights in the two charts below, which then shows the following enhanced metrics. The first being non-saline water use intensity by project age, starting from the year of first steam. This is an important graph to show how a project is progressing with their water usage through a project life cycle. As mentioned earlier, where a project is in its life cycle, it can greatly affect its water usage. A typical in situ project requires more makeup water during the initial startup stage when it first starts steaming and heating up the reservoir. After a few years of the makeup water requirements decrease because enough water returns to the surface to meet most of the steaming requirements. As a result, non-saline water use intensity tends to reduce with project age. As you can see with this particular example, the non-saline water use intensity starts off relatively high, but drops continuously for the first few years until it reaches a consistency intensity in the project's 4th year of operation. After this, it hovers around or just below the industry average, which it is likely to do until the end of the project's life. The next visual is the breakdown of water by year. This graph shows the water use breakdown against oil production for the selected project over the years of operation. The fourth and final visual in the in situ report is the 2016 sources of non-saline water. This is an interactive map showing the non-saline water sources used by in situ companies and for which project they belong to. You can hover over any point on the map to see which project the water is connected to. You can also filter by the scheme subtype, these being commercial CSS or commercial SAGD, and the company and the specific project. I would like to now invite Aruna up to present the data for mining. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaylee. Good morning, everyone. In mining, water is used in the bitumen extraction process and in the supporting utility systems, such as in the production of steam. The majority of water used in oil sands mining is water used from recycled ponds, and it's from tailings ponds, averaging at about 80% between 2012 and 2016. The remaining 20% is water from the lower Athabasca River and groundwater and surface runoff, also called makeup water. Mining uses the most water compared to the other extraction technologies, and that's due to the nature of the processes and technologies involved and available to extract the bitumen. Let's now look at some company data. We have here a bubble chart that shows mining water performance for 2016 in terms of total makeup water in blue here, which is the sum of water withdrawn from the lower Athabasca River and groundwater and surface runoff, as well as in terms of recycled water, which is shown in green. The next chart has on the left-hand side total makeup water, followed by bitumen production, and the water use intensity from 2012 to 2016 for all mining companies. The decreases in total makeup water were due to increasing water recycling and reuse programs, recognizing that water consumption is also dependent on oil production plans, processes involved, ore quality, and project stage, among other factors. A company's water use efficiency also depends on the factors that I just mentioned. And we look at water use intensity as an industry performance measure for efficiency. Water use intensity represents the volume of water required to produce 1 barrel of oil equivalent, regardless of the size of the operation. In 2016, oil sands mining used 2.5 barrels of water to produce 1 barrel of oil equivalent, whereas in 2012, they used 2.85 barrels of water to produce 1 barrel of oil equivalent. This decrease in intensity of 14% represents an increase in efficiency. And some factors that contributed to this decrease are improvements in technology and operational processes. The next chart here shows total makeup water breakdown as lower Athabasca River water in light blue and groundwater and surface runoff in darker blue. And as I mentioned earlier, this accounts for 20% of the water used in bitumen production. Again, the remaining 80% comes from water from the tailings ponds that's been recycled, and it's shown in green here. The next chart shows the surface water quantity management framework limits for the lower Athabasca River, also known as the SWQMF limits. These are weekly limits that regulate the total quantity of river water available as determined by the Government of Alberta to support human and ecosystem needs with an acceptable balance between social, environmental, and economic interests. The SWQMF limits here are shown in blue, and they are compared to the river water flow, which is shown in green. And the river flow is higher than the SWQMF limits all the time. The next chart shows the same SWQMF limit that we just saw on the previous chart in blue compared to the total river water withdrawal rates for the oil sands mines. And they are all below the SWQMF limits all the time, averaging about 25% of the 2016 limits. This shows that the SWQMF limits have not been exceeded and that the lower Athabasca river water environment is highly protected. This takes me to the end of the mining section. Thank you for your attention. I will now turn it over back to Bob.
Thanks, Aruna. So we're just going to open it up for questions now. So if anybody has any questions, we do have a microphone that Jordan has. So we'll open it up to the floor. And also, if anyone on the webcast has questions, please send it in and we'll read those out and answer those for you as well.
Hi, Tristan from 770 News here in Calgary. Two questions, I guess. Start off with average Albertans who go home tonight and they see this in the news. What's the takeaway that they should be walking away with when it comes to how they should be feeling about how the energy sector is using water in the province?
So thanks very much. The first thing is, I guess, average Albertans should feel comfortable. There is continued improvement in how the energy sector is using water. They treat this seriously. The regulator is also really looking at what they're doing with this water. So there's folks on top of this, and we can see there's general improvement on an ongoing year-to-year basis.
Just as a follow-up question, often we hear politicians talk about, our oil sands projects are some of the most technologically advanced in the world. Does this kind of lend credence to that kind of narrative that tends to go out there as part of what they talk about?
Yeah, there's no question there is tremendous innovation within the oil and gas space, both within the regulator as well as the industry that we are regulating. Through that innovation, it's pretty clear that technology plays a critical role in them continuing to advance in their wise use of water.
Further questions? Monica, do we have anything on the webcast? Okay, so thank you for coming today. Tristan, Kaylee, and Aruna will remain and are available for interviews if you have any follow-up questions. Thank you.